No es necesario usar las armas, no es necesario usar las armas. Calmado. Tranquilo.
¿Le dieron algo a él? ¿Algún arma? ¿Tatuaje?
And again, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Christopher Kerr, Executive Director at the Ignatian Solidarity Network. We're grateful to have you with us to discuss the situation in Honduras today surrounding their presidential election and the subsequent events that have happened. Joining us today is Dr. Joaquin Mejia Rivera, a researcher at Radio Progreso and Equipo de Reflexión Investigación and Comunicación, known as ERIC. These are both Jesuit-sponsored human rights and social research ministries based in El Progreso, Honduras. Dr. Mejia Rivera, who earned a PhD in human rights studies at the Universidad Carlos III de Madrid in Spain, has been working with Radio Progreso and ERIC since 2009, and throughout his career has held a number of human rights advocacy and academic teaching positions. Led by a Jesuit priest affectionately known as Padre Melo, Radio Progreso and ERIC, whose work encompasses grassroots radio programming, training on human rights, community organizing, leadership formation for social change, and aiding migrant families, was founded in 1980. Images shared by Radio Progreso via social media earlier this week and over the past couple weeks illustrate a volatile situation in the Honduran capital and throughout the country, as protesters have been challenged in some cases injured by police and military. As you may know, on Sunday, the Honduran Election Commission declared the current president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, the victor of the November 26th election. However, the Organization of American States has called for a new election, arguing that the vote was riddled with irregularities that made it impossible to be sure of a winner. Radio Progreso has made a similar call in a public proposal that was issued that same day on November 26th. And so we're excited to have Dr. Mejia Rivera with us and welcome him to share an overview of what's happening in Honduras. So welcome, Joaquin. We're glad you can be with us today.
Thank you very much, and for giving us this space in order to share what's happening in Honduras right now.
Well, we're grateful to have you with us, and I understand that you have had to move into a safer location from the Radio Progreso office. Can you tell us where you're joining us from? Not exactly, but generally speaking.
Well, there is a political crisis on the street near the building of Radio Progreso, so we have received messages that maybe some people, we don't know what kind of people, can go to our institution, and that's why I had to move to other place. And please forgive me because, or I apologize because you are going to listen to some noises coming from the street.
No worries. We're glad that you're safe and that you're in a safe location right now, and that you have strong internet to be able to join us and to share these important perspectives from Honduras, in particularly in light of the role that the U.S. has played in Honduras's story for many years. We're interested to learn about the situation, the role of the U.S., and how those here in the U.S., as well as in other parts of North America, can walk with you in solidarity. So I hope that as we begin today, you could open up by providing some context, because what has happened over the past 3 weeks is not just the result of the past 3 weeks. It is the result of many years. It is the result of events that have happened over time. So can you please share with us some context for what is happening and how history has led to it?
Yeah, actually, I would like to share with you a brief radiography of the Honduran political crisis, and I think it's very important to set 7 questions to understand what is happening. The first question is, what elements in common can we observe between the 2009 elections and the 2017 election, the current elections? And there are 3 elements in common with elections celebrated in 2009, which makes them a tense, polarized, and deeply questioned process in 2017. The first one is both elections in 2009 in the current election, they are preceded by ruptures of the constitutional order. In 2009, there was a coup against the head of the executive branch with the collusion of the National Congress, the Supreme Court of Justice, and the military forces. And in 2015, the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Court of Justice, despite it was not legally entitled to do it, declared irrelevant and not applicable to the order, the constitutional article that forbids presidential re-elections. And the second common element is both elections are conditioned by the absolute control of the democratic institution by illegitimate powers. In 2009, by all authorities under de facto government imposed by the force of the arms, and now by a group of 17 families led by the President Hernandez, which exercise a strong control over national politics and economy. And the third element in common is that these two elections in 2009 and 2017 had been overshadowed by high levels of citizen distrust in democratic institutions. According to our more recent opinion poll, 77% of Honduran population don't trust the Supreme Electoral Tribunal in charge of the transparency and legitimacy of the electoral process. The second question that we have to answer is, what are the main or the four main issues without which the current political crisis cannot be understood? First one, the original sin that represents the re-election of Orlando Hernandez, which is prohibited by the national constitution. The second one is the institutional control by President Hernandez. There is an absolute control over democratic institutions like the public prosecutor, the ombudsman, the Supreme Court of Justice, and the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, among others. The third thing is the lack of citizen trust in that institutionally. Actually, according to the same public opinion poll, 81% of the population believe judges and fiscal protect interests of corrupt and powerful people in Honduras. And the fourth one is the political support of the State Department and U.S. Embassy in Tegucigalpa to the government of Hernandez. For example, in this crisis, in this electoral crisis, at the beginning, the U.S. Embassy kept fairly quiet. Heidi Fulton, who is the highest ranking American diplomat in the country, asked Honduran people to be calm, and this played right into President Hernandez's hands, who declared a state of emergency and imposed martial law, securing for himself a wide berth to use Honduras American trained security forces to repress opposition. Second, 2 days after the election, the State Department certified that Honduras had made progress in protecting human rights and attacking corruption. This allows for the release of millions of dollars in the United States assistance to the Hernandez government. And since then, Mr. Fulton has assisted President Hernandez by appearing with David Matamoros, who is the president of the Electoral Tribunal, and he is also a member of the political party of Hernandez, and his daughter is the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs. That's the third question. Why are there suspicions of electoral fraud in Honduras? One, the day after the election, Honduras Supreme Electoral Tribunal announced that with more than half of the votes counted, the opposition candidate, Salvador Nasrallah, have a 5-point lead over Hernandez. One of the magistrates of the Electoral Tribunal declared that this lead mathematically was insurmountable. Two, however, the Electoral Tribunal composed for supporters of Mr. Hernandez suspended announcement about the count for several hours, and after a several-hour outage of the tribunal computer system, the trend reversed. When its updates resumed, the President Hernandez was in the lead, setting off deep suspicions of electoral fraud. And 3, the electoral observation mission in Honduras of the Organization of American States reported that the electoral process was characterized by irregularities and deficiencies with very low technical quality, intentional elimination of digital traces, the impossibility of knowing the number of opportunities in which the system was violated, poached the votes open or lacking votes, the extreme statistical improbability with respect to participation levels within the same department, recently printed ballots. Actually, the OAS pointed out that only possible way for the victor to be the people of Honduras is a new call for general elections. The fourth question, which is the situation of human rights during this political crisis? The Inter-American Commission of Human Rights and the Office of the High Commissioner of United Nations of Human Rights in Honduras expressed their deep concern about the loss of human lives in the context of social protest, and pointed as responsible military police of public order, which was created by President Hernandez in 2013 and is under his command. Second, human rights organizations have documented at least 23 arbitrary executions committed by the national police and the military police. Thousands of people have been injured and illegally detained, and it has been documented that military and police shoot live bullets against people using unnecessary and disproportionate force, and throw tear gas bombs compulsively, even against pregnant women, children, and elderly. 3, the 1st of December, the government of Honduras suspended all citizen constitutional rights through an illegal decree. The OAS General Secretariat considered disproportionate the application of this measure in the face of demonstrations that took place following the already denounced irregularities of the Electoral Act carried out on November 26, and requested the immediate lifting of these measures. 4, Radio Progreso, our radio, suffered a sabotage of its communications tower that supports the antenna that allow the transmission of its signal to the central zone, particularly to Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras. And the Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, Edison Lanza, expressed his concern about it and demanded an independent investigation of this attack. 5, Human Rights Watch pointed out that there are strong indications of election fraud in Honduras and called Honduras authorities to maintain the right to freedom of assembly and refrain from using unnecessary or disproportionate force. 6, the International Federation of Human Rights urged the Honduran authorities to respect the right to pacifically protest and condemn that demonstrations are violently suppressed. And 7, Amnesty International highlights an essential element that distinguishes a democracy from a dictatorship. According to this organization, there is no place for people in Honduras to express our opinion. When this happens, people is at risk of facing the full force of the government's repressive apparatus. The 5 questions. What conclusion can we take from the current political crisis? The first one, the political crisis generated by the coup in 2009 keeps intact. Second, the high citizen rejection to the continuous project of President Hernandez and the citizen outrage in face of institutional collapse and illegality of the regime. 3, the repressive and authoritarian nature of the government of Orlando Hernandez, which is willing to do anything to hold power. 4, the ambiguity and tepidity of the U.S. government in face of irregularities of the electoral process and the violation of human rights committed by security forces trained and financially supported by the U.S. 5, the America's blind eye to a long list of authoritarian actions that Mr. Hernandez has committed for years in order to keep himself in power. And 6, the post-election crisis has left Honduras representative democracy in intensive care and highly questioned institutionality that requires profound structural reforms, which must be accompanied by the international community. What do we propose in front of or before this electoral crisis, political crisis? The main important things: apply the Inter-American Democratic Charter in order to, first, declare the nullity of the elections, two, guarantee a great national agreement and the appointment of a provisional and transitory government that is committed to, first, ask the Honduran people through a plebiscite if it is agree or not with allowing the presidential re-election, and two, convene and organize under international surveillance a new electoral process in a reasonable and feasible time. And the last question to be answered: why is important the role of the international community, particularly of the Department of State? And there are two roads, there are two ways. The first one, if the US government supports the Organization American States recommendation for a new call for general elections, we can be in front of the beginning of a transitional time in order to restore the democratic system, which is very important for Honduran people. And if the Department of State takes the other way, and if the U.S. government supports the decision of the Electoral Tribunal to declare president to Juan Orlando Hernandez, we think and we believe that it will be the final step of the consolidation of an authoritarian democracy or a real dictatorship that was born with a coup d'etat in 2009.
Joaquin, thank you for laying out a lot of that. You brought together not just the current situation, but looking back to the beginnings of much of this with the coup in 2009. I thought we would take a quick opportunity to look at a few images that we have put together from Radio Progreso that they've shared via their social media channels. And again, welcome those who've just joined us, who are joining us via Facebook Live. If you have questions that you'd like to ask, we're live tweeting, and so you can ask those via Twitter at hashtag ISN Live, or ask them via Facebook as well. Joaquin, this is an image. This is kind of the beginning of what happened a few weeks ago. This was election day at a polling place. It looks like a school. And can you just talk about really quickly about what the tenor was that day? What was the mood? Were people anticipating something like this happening?
No, actually, the electoral process during that day was it was like a party, a civilian party, because people believed that our votes were going to be into consideration in order to establish the government in Honduras. The problem was later when the electoral tribunal took control over the counting of the votes.
Let's go to that next image, which shows us kind of the beginning of tabulation, and you can see it looks like a poll worker or maybe a observer actually holding a ballot. And that evening, as the results were coming in, initially, what were people? Where were they? What were they feeling with the results trending the way they were?
Indignation. I mean, people were very angry at the authorities because they thought that they had to go massively to vote, because people in Honduras want to change the current regime. Juan Orlando Hernandez and his party has been, has been in the power for 8 years, and during that time, he or they have taken some decisions that are not good for people in Honduras, and that's why this election was an opportunity for people to to change the government and to dream about having a new government and to dream to start finishing the political crisis that we had in 2009 with the coup d'etat.
In these next images, these start to show a little bit of the tension that developed. Can you talk a little bit about some of the ways that people express their frustration, their anger, their angst in the days after the election?
Actually, if you that picture is a very common picture in all over the territory of the country. And for example, in this city, El Progreso, there are if you want to go to Tegucigalpa, to the capital, you have to pass by El Progreso. And if you want to go to the Caribbean, you have to pass by El Progreso or San Pedro Sula, which is the industrial capital of the country. But in this moment, for example, it's impossible to get out of El Progreso because you can see these kind of pictures in all of the roads in the city.
This was a woman who appeared to be injured. Can you talk about some of the ways that that people have been physically injured and why? Maybe we don't know the exact situation of this woman. This was an image shared, via social media. But can you talk about some of the ways that people have been physically harmed in the protest or with the protests?
Yeah, here in Honduras there are two police forces: the national police, which is a civil police, and there is another one which is the military police, which was created by Juan Orlando Hernandez in 2013, and this police is under his command. Actually, a week ago, the national police decided not to go out to a street in order to attack population who is protesting against the electoral fraud. So the President Hernandez used the military police, which is under his command, and these military police are military forces. They don't see the citizen, the people in the street, like citizens. They see them like enemies, and because they have this military logic, and that's why when they face people in the street, they attack them with live bullets, with gas bombs, and they don't respect if they are women, pregnant women, children. Actually, they get into the houses and they get out people from the houses, and they illegally detain people. So the situation is, I can say that the situation is even worse than the situation that we have in 2009 during the coup d'etat.
And you mentioned earlier the radio tower, Radio Progreso's radio tower. This is a picture of that tower, yes?
Exactly.
Can you talk about the impact of that on the radio station, and maybe talk about the work? Maybe if you can give folks who aren't as familiar with Radio Progreso a little bit of a sense of the work that station is able to do, the information they're able to share, that would be helpful.
Well, Radio Progreso is the only radio in Honduras that is trying to give or trying to give real information of what's happening in the country, and we are a radio that is considered opposition by the government of Juan Orlando Hernandez. And because we are the only radio that are, giving what or informing what is happening in the country, the violation of human rights, the disproportionate use of force by the military forces. So this antenna was in a mountain in Tegucigalpa, and this antenna allows to transmit the signal in Tegucigalpa. And now, for example, we are not. We are not transmitting our frequency in Tegucigalpa, and to recover the signal cost around 2 million lempiras, which is more than, I think is more than, or around $40,000.
Wow. Okay. So right now, Radio Progreso is just broadcasting via internet. Is that right?
Internet in El Valle de Sula, I mean San Pedro Sula, El Progreso, especially in the east and in the north of the country, but not in the west and in the capital.
Got it. And do you have any sense of you or your colleagues have any sense of who did? Do you have a strong sense of? Do you know who did this?
We don't know, but we believe that it was or the government or some group, linked to the government of Juan Orlando Hernandez, because in that mountain there were more antennas of other radio stations, but the only antenna that was sabotaged was our antenna.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like something that just a strong wind caused to happen.
No. It's clear that it was not because of the climate. Sure.
Joaquin, we have a few questions that have been shared by folks who are watching via Facebook Live. And again, welcome to those who are watching. You can follow our live tweets at hashtag ISN Live, or share comments or questions on our Facebook page. Joaquin, one of the questions they asked to learn a little bit more about, obviously Radio Progreso is an Eric or a work of the Church of the Society of Jesus there in Honduras, but they asked to learn more about the work and the presence of the Catholic Church more broadly. Is the Church speaking out? Where is the Catholic Church in the midst of all this tension?
Well, unfortunately, the authorities of the Catholic Church in Honduras are I'm not saying anything about this. I mean, the Cardinal Oscar Andrés Rodriguez, for example, he is in silent, quiet. But, for example, there is another authorities of the church, especially in the north coast of Honduras, who has given a word, a critic word about what is happening in this moment, and saying that what the government of Orlando Hernandez is doing is not right and is against the legality.
Yes. Someone also asked about the discrepancy right now between, or if there's a discrepancy between the position of the Organization of American States and the position of the United States of America. And could you talk a little bit more about where you see the U.S. position right now, why that might be problematic, particularly in light of the need for the Organization of American States to become more involved in the situation?
Actually, we have to be clear that the President Hernandez is like a pretty boy of the U.S. government, because he's doing all the things that the U.S. government, I can say it, ordered to do in our countries, especially in matters related to drug trafficking, immigration. And the government of Orlando Hernandez is a government who, for the United States, is putting everything in order in the country and in the region, because we have to remember that in the region, in the Central American region, there are two leftist governments, the government of El Salvador and Nicaragua. So Honduras is playing the same role that played during the 80s, when it was a platform of the the U.S. government in order to, to attack and to keep away the communism that in Honduras and the other countries of the region. That's why for the government of the United States, not only for Trump, but also for Obama, the government of Orlando Hernandez is a very important ally in the region. And what we are seeing is that it's very dangerous that the U.S. government supports this government with this electoral fraud, because the United States is not going to be able to criticize other governments like in Venezuela, in Bolivia, or in Nicaragua, who, for example, Daniel Ortega or Juan Orlando Hernandez has done the same steps and have made the same step that Ortega did in Nicaragua in order to get this institutional control and to allow the presidential election and everything. So the United States is, I think, is in a very difficult position, because if the United States decides to support the government of Juan Orlando Hernandez, I think is not going to be, or is not going to have the moral capacity to criticize Venezuela, Bolivia, or Nicaragua.
It's a good point. So thinking about this, how can those in the U.S., Canada, even in Europe, how can we walk with the Honduran people who are struggling for transparency, struggling for truth, struggling for justice right now?
Yeah, I think we have a very important, declaration right now, and it's the Declaration of the Organization of American States, which is recommending to call for new elections. So I think civil society in Europe and the United States, and those people who work in the government have the opportunity to try to, to convince the U.S. government in order to support the declaration of the Organization of American States, because it can be the first step to get out of this political crisis. Because if the U.S. government support the government of Orlando Hernandez, I think the situation is going to be very hard. It's going to be more difficult than it is right now. And I think we are going to have a very high and strong political repression by the government of Orlando Hernandez.
Mm-hmm. In 2014, one of your colleagues, Carlos Mejia, was found murdered in his home in El Progreso. He had worked for nearly 15 years with Radio Progreso. And so this, and Carlos is not the only person who has faced either threat or faced death in both activists, journalists, and others in Honduras. Can you talk a little bit about the dangers of the work that Radio Progreso is doing, and others as well, human rights activists who are out in the field every day, trying to bring bring out the truth of what is happening, trying to work for justice?
Okay, let me say three things about that thing. The first one, there is a grave situation of insecurity related to freedom of expression faced by journalists and other media workers, which makes them particularly vulnerable segment of the population. Actually, since 2001, 70 journalists have been murdered in Honduras, and the 91% are in impunity. This is the first thing. The other thing is that there is a situation of repression and political persecution against human rights defenders, And according to Global Witness, which is an international organization, Honduras is the most dangerous per capita country in the world for those who defend human rights. Actually, the statistics are alarming. Only in the last year, 2016, 14 defenders were murdered, and since 2007, 127 defenders have been murdered. And the second thing, it has to do with me. Actually, I have 1 week that we have to left our house with my family because I am under threat. So my family is living in different parts of the city with other familiars, and we cannot go back to our house. And it is a situation. I mean, I don't know how to explain this situation when, because of threats, you have to leave your house, leave your neighborhood, and to look for a place where you can be a little bit protected, sheltered. And as I told you, my situation, my personal situation, and the family of my situation, it is a case that reflects what is happening with the human rights defender in Honduras.
How do you see what is happening in Honduras right now impacting migration out of Honduras? It seems to be a very volatile situation, that particularly if you are a young person, if you were someone with a family, you could be very tempted to say, I do not, I want to get away from this. I want to find a safer place where myself, my family can live and be more fully human. How do you see what's happening in Honduras impacting migration moving forward?
Because of that, I think the government, the U.S. government, has to support the OAS declaration in order to call for new elections. Because if Juan Orlando Hernandez stayed in power, we are going to face more instability, and we are going to have more political repression, and this is going to impact in the movement of population, going out of the country, or for example, this situation of widespread violence and then political violence in the country is going to lead to a significant increase in the numbers of refugees and asylum seekers in the United States and in other countries. Again, my case, for example, I am a human rights defender and a little bit, recognized in the country. And I am going through this situation that I have to leave my house. You can think and you can imagine what's happening to other people who live in other neighborhoods who are not very known by the society or by the authorities. So I am sure, and we are sure, that it's going to have a very great impact in the number of refugee and asylum seekers in the United States.
Where do you find hope, and where can the Honduran people find hope in the current reality there?
I think I have no answer for the question, but I think people in Honduras, the only thing that we want is to have a peaceful country, to have a country without violence. We have a country where we can raise our children without fear. We don't want to go to the United States. We don't want to go to other countries to live. We want to stay here in Honduras. But the problem is in countries like Honduras, which is ubicated in a geopolitical strategic point of the region. Those decisions that are taken that in Washington have a very great impact in the political situation here. And it is terrible to say that this political crisis is going to have maybe a solution only if the U.S. government takes a position, that support the declaration of the Organization of American States in order to call for new election. It's terrible to say it, but we have to accept that the influence of the U.S. government in this country is very important.